order. Gavel, there it is. This is the meeting of the Carson City Library Board of Trustees. Let's get started with the roll call, please.
Chairperson Knight,
Present.
Vice Chair Lucas,
Present.
Trustee Markle,
Present.
Trustee Nichols,
Present.
Trustee Olivas.
Present.
A quorum is present.
Thank you. We will move on to agenda item 2. That is public comment. Any members of the public who wish to address the Library Board of Trustees may come forward and speak on any topic that's relevant to us at this time. Do we have any public comment in the room? Anybody on the phone?
There are no colors on the line.
Thank you, voice in the sky. All right. Hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item 3. This is approval for the minutes from last meeting. I'll be abstaining from this one because I did not attend last meeting. Unexcused. Did everybody have a chance to review these minutes?
This is Trustee Markle. I move that we approve the September 22nd, 2022 minutes of the last meeting.
Thank you for the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No opposed. I will abstain. Thank you. Moving on. Agenda item 4, information only. This is Friends of the Carson City Library report. Do we have a report?
Sina Lloyd, Carson City, Friends of the Carson City Library President. You'll see a presentation here. Joy asked us to come and just briefly describe what we do, what we're here for, what's kind of going on with the Friends. Unfortunately, we probably won't be able to provide this report every meeting, as I will be stepping down as president when my term ends in January, and most of the other members are uncomfortable driving in the evening. So that's part of what will happen. But if anybody wants to come to a Friends meeting and then report from that meeting or take away any of that, I know Betts has attended meetings in the past. I think that's a good way to do that. So the Friends of the Carson City Library was founded in 1966, and they actually established the Carson City Library. Before that, the public was served by the State Library here in Carson City. And they took up residence in what's now the Children's Museum in that basement before they raised funds and got grant funding to build the current library that you have now, and then also raised funds and received a grant to add the addition in the 1980s. So just to note on that, the city has never built a library building for this community. So with that, the Friends of the Library, we do have some restricted funding that we have for the library for a building fund if there was ever a building to be built. It is definitely not enough to build that library, but want you all to know that that does sit there and that is available to use if you were able to do that. It cannot be used for modifications to the current building due to the nature of the gift. So what we also do is we provide money to the library. As you can see up here, we have received grants for 2023 requests from Joy and the library team for Capital City Reads, Summer Learning Program, and Digital Collection Expansion. We do not see any issue with these grants, though we'll have to formally approve them in our next meeting. But thank you, Joy, for submitting those. I also think that we have the opportunity to again engage with the library in maybe some innovative things. So if it's the board or if it's the library staff thinking of things that we can do innovatively, I think that that's something we would like to see kind of come across the table. In the past, the Friends have they funded the pedal library, so that's the little like book cart on the back of a bicycle. Something that I always saw when I was the library director as something the Friends might be able to fund is maybe an electric bike to go along with that. So anybody can ride that bike, especially up a hill, because when it's full of books, it's really heavy. Yes. So I think that there's innovative things that we could do to help fund the library help fund the library do innovative programs. What we are not likely to fund, anything that the city should be paying for. That's been something that has been pretty staunch even in my time as the library director, but the core membership is pretty hard set on we're not going to fund positions unless it's a innovative position for a grant single time. We're not going to fund the necessary allocation or baseline allocation of funding for collection development. Things like that are probably not something that you're going to see the Friends of the Library approve to fund. That's okay. This is our membership. Our membership is not how we make money. Our membership does allow for people who are members to receive discounts in the bookstore. But the bookstore, Browser's Corner across the street from the library, is our primary and right now only fundraising source. In the past, the Friends have done events and other types of things, but it's been a core group, and it's the same core group as 10 years ago. And what they've relayed to me is they're getting older, they're not going to do events, they're the only ones doing them. And so until they build up additional membership and additional individuals willing to take on those projects, the core funding mechanism is going to continue to be the Browser's Corner bookstore. And that is completely volunteer run. So volunteer opportunities at or with the Friends of the Library. We have the bookstore. Currently, we have the board. We have nominations open for president, treasurer, and then we have a vacant partial term for 1 year for our secretary position. We also always welcome committee members to serve on different committees and committee chairs. So for example, right now our fundraising committee chair is vacant. And so if there is anybody in the community that wanted to take on fundraising as part of the Friends of the Library, they could come on board and do so. But that's not the focus at the moment. And this is how you can get a hold of us, friendsinfo@friendsofcclibrary.org. And I will entertain any questions if there are any.
Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Lloyd. Do we have any questions from the board members?
Thank you for the presentation. I learned a couple of things I didn't know. And I used to volunteer a long time ago. So thank you. I do have a question though. Does the Friends of the Library ever, or in the past, or have they thought about getting volunteers, young volunteers, maybe somebody who's thinking about becoming a librarian, kind of like an intern type thing?
I mean, it's not necessarily something that I don't think that has been thought of. However, there are no current dedicated volunteers at the bookstore who are trained librarians who would probably qualify under giving that internship, because there would have to be somebody that they essentially report to be able to manage that individual. Now, I do know that through the high school, there's individuals who do need to serve volunteer hours for different commitments that they've made in Key Club or for like scholarship applications, and they have volunteered at the library in the past.
Oh, good. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Nichols. Do we have any other questions from the trustees?
I would just say, wouldn't it be nice if we had a group of people out there who were looking forward to becoming librarians? Young people, just jumping at the chance to become librarians.
You never know.
You never know.
You can influence them.
Because sometimes people change. They go one direction and they segue into libraries, as we know.
And they're welcome to that too, I suppose. You can get everyone from multiple walks. Thanks, Trustee Merkel. Do I have anyone else? Before I let you go, thank you, Ms. Lloyd, for coming. I realize there is no requirement for you to come and present to us. So thank you for taking your time out and to doing that. And especially on Bonanza Traffic Night, that's that's a heck of a time.
Plus
to be coming.
voting.
And voting too, that's right, I forgot. Early voting is good. We should vote and get access there. I do want to take advantage of you being here, and maybe this is a question for both of you and Director Holt. If you could expand, kind of give me a larger sense and walk us through kind of the role of a friends organization within a library versus maybe like what a foundation does, how things are in Carson City. I'd really appreciate that.
So one of the things I left out of this presentation purposely, but I will answer your question. So in Nevada in 2017, the Las Vegas Clark County Library District submitted a BDR or a bill. I mean, I guess it became
Eventually became
it became a law.
Yeah. Mhm.
And essentially what that did for them was an interesting idea on how they could build a new library. And they did build a new library with that law passing. And it was using new market tax credits and using the foundation to kind of funnel is probably the wrong word here, but as the mechanism to have donors make those donations, but also get this pretty substantial tax credit to build a library. And I believe it was the library in East Las Vegas. It is a library that is in Senator Mo Dennis's district, and Senator Mo Dennis is the one who introduced that legislation. But what that did in the process is it essentially made the friends of any library, if there is not a secondary foundation that is funding library goodwill, if you will, like funding a library, that they have to comply with open meeting law. So our Friends organization, unlike any other nonprofit in the state of Nevada, has to comply with open meeting law when we have our meetings. We don't have to essentially like open up our donor logs to public, but we do have to do other certain things to comply with that open meeting law. So in Carson City, we used to have a foundation and there was a Friends organization. That foundation, I want to say at the beginning of my tenure as the library director, so I was the library director from 2014 to the end of 2018, that foundation folded essentially into the Friends. So they collapsed, but they provided all of their assets that they had to the Friends organization. That included some restricted funds, which I want to say at the beginning of the former director Colgrove's time as director, we did use some of those funds to purchase some books, but it's like very specific. It was like ballet and flowers and history, and it was physical copies of those books. And there is some funds left, and that could potentially be used for like ebooks, but we have to wait out a certain, I'm not a lawyer, so this is just what we were told, but we have to wait out a certain period of time because there is essentially no heirs to that trust anymore that was given. And so to be able to access that money in a way that wasn't specified, we have to do that. So we are essentially the recipients of those types of gifts as a Friends, somewhat foundation group. But the law that changed in 2017 essentially also makes us a de facto foundation for the library due to the lack of having another foundation.
So thank you for that history lesson. I very much appreciate it. So the way I understand it, just kind of in very broad terms, is within a community, and perhaps this isn't in Nevada, but within a community, you have a library, you have a Friends organization that usually is doing fundraising, like you do, and usually that fundraising is totally designed to be donated to that library to support, and like you said, for things that perhaps the city wouldn't pay for, things like that. my understanding then is that a foundation would be maybe larger funding in terms of like pulling down grants or very specific project oriented. Like if you're aiming to build that building or whatever it is.
Yeah, usually they're also
And advocates.
formed differently. So the Friends is a 501c3. We can do some minimal advocacy. However, as a foundation, if it was a 501c6, which is what the foundation was before it collapsed here in Carson City, they can actually do a lot more advocacy. They can collect funds for, here they would be questions. So if if you went to the voters with a, hey, can we charge a 25-cent tax to build a new library, the foundation could handle essentially would handle some of the things that essentially the library itself as a city entity cannot do.
So telling people how to vote, right? So
Yeah.
if you raise money,
Mhm.
you can
Print the signs,
yeah.
those things.
And
Mhm.
advocate, but really, it seems to me that'd be the distinction there. So being that we don't have one, you're folded in necessarily. Do you see that as a role that you have difficulty filling?
So it is something that the Friends could continue to do. I think it's if we did, if it was to go out to a question to try to get funding to build a new library, or even if, this is my opinion, but I would not suggest going out to become a library district yourself, because you have to get permission from a bunch of other districts, and I'm sure that your city attorney could tell you all of the ins and outs of what that might look like. But the Friends would need to also apply for a 501c6. That's just because the assets were folded in, that doesn't mean they retained the ability to kind of like fully operate as a political nonprofit.
Got it. Okay. Appreciate that explanation. Do we have any other questions while we're here? I know I would look forward to an opportunity to make membership renewal a bit smoother, having been a member in the past. And I don't know, you're completely volunteer run, and I don't know what even tools you have.
I personally also do not like the way that our system operates. Every time I've gone to renew, we have a problem with our website, and I have to get, we have a marketing team, which is also, the library does use them to some extent, but we definitely do not pay market rate for their services. And so they'll fix those things for us. But because we do not have a volunteer base that is tech oriented, it does make it more difficult than it could probably be.
Well, I feel like we have a fair overview of some potential challenges here. What can this board do for you?
So I think that kind of twofold. I think that, not every one of you has to come to meetings. And it is noticed. So you can look at the agenda and you can look at minutes online as well. But just, having that knowledge, working through Joy, understanding if there's an ask from the board, that, that can be done through Joy, but also, reaching out. The officers of the Friends, minus myself, are longtime serving. Even prior to me being library director, serving as members of the Friends and longtime members in this community. They have a lot of knowledge, and that knowledge needs to be transferred somehow. So, even going to coffee with them, I think would be a good idea. I think that when there is a need of the library that goes beyond the capability or charter essentially of the library board, I think that that's where the Friends can potentially fulfill it. And I'll give my little spiel that I kind of gave at the last Friends meeting. Joy was there. But I think that in this community, like, the library board and Joy are in charge of censoring, right? Like if somebody challenges a book, you are the ones to make that decision. but the Friends of the Library are also here to ensure that nothing is censored in our library. Mein Kampf resides on the shelves just as much as a book about two penguins. And I think that's important to remember, is that we do have members of this community who advocate on behalf of knowledge for all, no matter what that knowledge might be. And I think that the Friends can fulfill that need if they know that they need to do that.
Thank you so much. Do we have any further questions for Ms. Lloyd while she's here? Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, guys.
All right, everybody. Let's we will move right into agenda item 5. This is my update on I don't know, we were trying to move the needle. We just talked about how advocacy is difficult. But this had to do with the cost of e-lending resources. I think I signed something for Director Hull here, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, and you'll get that in your report. But even calling it collection development, I'm not sure that that's the right name anymore if all we're doing is leasing, because that's the only option we have. And so that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about e-lending resources. You can no longer really purchase. Everything seems to be almost subscription based, and I question if that's a good use of public funds. I raised it during the interim session. This is my update to you. I raised this during the interim session to the Interim Committee on Government Affairs, gave a short presentation there. And where a previous state level bill back east failed, that court appeared to give us a roadmap into how maybe it could succeed. And tried to give some of that background. Now, interim committees have the option to reserve a bill draft or put in a bill draft request that's sponsored by the committee and not by an individual legislator. And so I think my hope was that they would grant one. They did not. So then another avenue, though, would be the Association of Counties, who also seem to sometimes sponsor or request those bills, and they don't necessarily have to have a individual legislator attached to them. It's my understanding that is also a no-go. Go ahead.
Joy Holt for the record. The NACO, the Nevada Association of Counties, their deadline was September 1. So I did give a little bit of, if the board will recall, we talked a little bit about this last time about how there's deadlines and they only get so many. And some of the legislators are, they have a staggered submission timeline. So it's really something that I would say we'd have to get very much ahead of it. And certainly we could do that by working with our PIO, the city's PIO. He's very savvy and happy to help. So we have a pretty strong resource there. We also have a Chair Knight who's very savvy at this as well. So, but at this point,
But that's 2 people.
right?
That's kind of the issue
Well,
that
me.
I'm kind of seeing, right? Is that we sent a letter. We
Yeah.
have had some other pieces where this board has tried to advocate as much as a board can. But I think that we have to pull more in, and I don't know really where that comes from.
I mean, more libraries.
More
Yeah.
libraries.
I think it would
more
be
support
critical to have the state
organizations.
library involved.
Right.
Which I know that you've reached out and that's not been necessarily picked up, for lack of a better phrase. I think also there's conversation that could certainly be had with the Nevada Library Cooperative. That's a lot of libraries. Now, granted, they're small, but that's a lot of libraries who could really advocate for themselves at the end of the day.
Mhm.
And when that little when that group of folks get together, they can make things happen. They've made it happen in the past. And Betts and our trustee Marco and Ms. Lloyd and I were all involved in that, making that happen. So we know it can be done, but it has to, it's mobilizing that needs to take place, I think.
Yeah, that's kind of, I think that's where I was going, is that there's a lot of work to be done. There are barriers that exist. Some of them are systemic, as we saw in Ms. Lloyd's presentation. Some of these things are just kind of built in, and some of it has to do with, like, Library and Archives has got a vacancy rate that I'm not sure anyone's seen in decades, really. And that's actually true for a lot of state agencies. So, I mean, there's a lot of deficits that we're operating under in terms of trying to advocate and potentially push forward. I've not seen a BDR yet drop involving, they are, because there's a staggered release on those. And you can go out and check on their website. I just pulled it up right now. So there's, it's slim, but there's still hope, because as I said, these mechanisms we engaged initially, these are not approaching individual legislators. They still, depending on where they sit and how long they've sat there, have a handful of BDRs that they could sponsor themselves. There was some interest on one on the Interim Committee on Government Affairs. So I've attempted to reach out several times to that individual. We will see how that goes. Not everybody monitors their legislative email when they're not in session. So that's,
Well, that would explain why
consideration.
they're dropping bills literally like 2 weeks before the start of session. That happened last legislative session.
they do that. They do that, you know. But that's okay, because we roll with it and we try to follow along as much as we can. So that's, I think that would conclude my update. I think, though, that there's, as much as there's some barriers, there's also resources that exist that could be tapped. And again, one person, two person probably isn't going to get as far as, you know, getting the whole crowd involved. So I guess my ask then, if there is one, is to keep us abreast, and I know you always do. That maybe it's the library cooperative next. And
Yeah.
see if we've got folks who are available to bend ears and explain the situation. I know it's not just us. This is a nationwide issue. But when it comes to electronic resources, we know that that's high demand. We know it's very expensive. And if we are constantly experiencing a churn where you can't truly develop what I would traditionally think of as a collection, because you're not really gathering anything, you're just paying subscriptions to access, that's troubling for me. So that's just for us all to consider, I guess.
Well,
Well-
sorry.
Oh, I was just going to add that
Mr. Markle, yeah.
based on my experience, which now is, you know, older, they're not, some of the books will revert to a lifetime, after a certain period. I mean, it's kind of like when you are developing a library collection, there's always bestsellers that, I mean, there's always the new books that come out every year, every month, every week. And you can't, there's a lot of them that only have like a 3 to 6 month lifespan, and you don't need to keep them. You don't need to keep the latest, you know, John Grisham or whatever. You don't necessarily need to do that. And so, you know, the way that those overdrive subscriptions work, I mean, there are different price points where if you want to keep them longer, or if you want to keep them indefinitely, there's prices. But a lot of libraries, I mean, you just don't have any use for them after that initial time frame.
Right, so.
As each individual libraries, I mean, there will be libraries in the country that will keep them.
So if we were to compare, and maybe it's not I don't know, is this comparison fair? My understanding is that what we pay for paper materials is commensurate with what the market pays. So if I'm going to go buy it at a bookstore, I'll pay about the same as what the library will purchase it for. It's a hard copy material if it's a physical book. What my understanding is that when it comes to electronic materials, we're seeing triple, quadruple.
Yeah,
the
that's true.
price, at
That's true.
least, what we're
And I
paying
will
for.
say, Trustee Markle, that we have seen, since I've been involved in the purchasing of overdrive or electronic materials of this type, the metered access has gotten, has grown and grown. So a lot more stuff is metered now than it was, you know, 3 years ago. And so, yeah, there will be things that we'll keep. And some, it's just very strange. I haven't been able to find the pattern as to how the decision is made about, okay, this will be metered, this won't be. I mean, the new stuff, obviously. But then the older stuff, at what point it becomes lifetime. So I'm sure that Rachel March, our collection development librarian, would have a better sense of that than I do, because she's obviously way more deep in that than I am, in terms of just seeing the pattern. But I can say that from my personal observation, that from 2016, 17 until now, way more titles are metered than they would have been back in 2017.
And that metered access being a layperson subscription.
Um,
basically, you pay for it
Right,
for a period of
or
time
having
that
a
no
short,
one-
and only having been able to have it for a limited amount of time.
Right.
Or
Um,
25 checkouts or
Yeah,
something.
it used to
So-
be that it was, I mean, I'm estimating on numbers here, but when I was doing purchasing before our collection development, 16, 17, every maybe fifth title or 10th title was a 26-month only checkout.
Mhm.
And now it's
Common.
the reverse.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's probably, it's more more often than not. So it's definitely something that, in fact, Rachel and I were talking about this back in 2018 when I was a library assistant at the Carson City Library, about how that was becoming more and more frequent. And she commented on that to me one day we were talking about it, and how more and more stuff was becoming metered in that way. And it just seemed as if the industry sort of went, oh, wait a second, why aren't we doing this? This is much more profitable.
They'll pay
Um,
either way.
Yeah.
So that's a piece, and then if you could tell me again how frequently you see where you have perhaps like an embargoed or a delayed access to when it's released for commercial use, like if you wanted to go purchase it as an individual versus when a library is actually allowed to even do
That
a
is,
metered access.
are you talking about when we can make it available to the user?
Yes.
So it can't be, it's much like print materials. It can't be made available to the user until the actual release date. So we do have print materials also that we hold on to until it can be made available to the public. It has to be released to the marketplace before we can release it to the user.
Right, so
Does that-
release to the marketplace 3 months ahead of when you can release it to a library user? 'Cause I
No.
feel like we've seen a couple of those, so
I've not.
maybe not, okay.
But that doesn't mean that isn't happening. I could certainly find out.
No, that's fine. Okay, yeah.
That tends to happen more in journal publications.
Ah, that's true.
Journal publishers they'll provide their database or their information to some of the article databases like EBSCO or something. But some of the publishers will withhold the whole article until after a year or something like that, because the journal subscriptions have dropped dramatically because people aren't getting paper subscriptions anymore. So they're more likely to hold that back, that total article back to force people to buy the entire journal, to have it delivered to their house or their library.
Yeah, that's terrific. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great
So
point.
that
Thank you,
happens
Trustee Markle.
much more often in journals.
In fact, I just experienced that myself, where a journal had held back an article. I think it was Elsevier.
Electronic. So if it were paper, it would be equitable or equal timing. Because it's electronic, you see that hold back.
Well, journals have traditionally been expensive anyway, academic journals anyway. And so when universities started having access electronically to all these articles, the paper publication rate dropped dramatically. So that's how they have made up their cost differences. But usually, I mean, if you're in a big library like UNR or something, and you're a researcher and you need an article from a particular journal, and you don't want to wait the 6 months, you either subscribe to that journal yourself. Maybe your department pays for it. Maybe you pay for it personally. Sometimes, I mean, you can now pay for articles individually. It's just a payment thing. Somebody has to get paid for the intellectual content, whether it's a journal or a book. I mean, even, any kind of book. So it's a kind of a supply and demand issue. And we all know that through the pandemic, the demand for electronic books, online books, has skyrocketed. And so, that's what happens when there's big demand. And, you'd think the supply would be endless. Why are they charging more? Because, it's just an electronic file. But still, if an author is selling 1,000 electronic copies of a book, they want more money than if another author is selling only 250 copies of a book.
And all that being the case, I would still say that we need to examine those things carefully. Not that we're here to
I agree.
advocate
I
on
agree.
behalf of supply and demand and who needs to make money, but
Right.
are we being good conservators of public funds, purchasing those things, being on the demand side? So here we are. And I think that's kind of
Yeah.
the root of the conversation, really want to get down to it. If we can get a BDR out of somebody, that'd be great this session. If not, I think we've got some breadcrumbs to go to another session.
We're not the
Well,
only
and I
people
also think
dealing.
that
We're not.
ALA is going to pivot
Yeah.
as to in terms of how they approach this. I think that from everything that I've read, they're picking themselves up, dusting themselves off, particularly in light of the New York failure, and then of course Maryland being sued and losing. I think that they're going to take a different tack as to how they're approaching this issue. And so I have every confidence that they're going to have this way more fleshed out by the next biennium, because I know that they're not going to let this go. I mean, when they've had their advocacy group, and this is a huge issue for them, and so I think that now they know, the ALA knows, they've got countless articles about how they know they need to pivot, and so now where are they going to go? So we will have more breadcrumbs, from them, and
Which is helpful,
they're we're unique in that we have a biennium, right? So we'll see them hopefully within the next year making some strides for the majority of the nation's legislative session.
This is just a suggestion, but because we were talking about getting advocates, to the BDR, I think some advocates we may be overlooking are users, right? So if I go into the library because I'm borrowing an e-reader or I'm getting a hardback book, and I see this little poster or little flyer sitting on the desk talking about the issue, I may go wait because I love ebooks. It may bother me enough to go talk to somebody about it. You never know who's going to walk into the library either and see that and say, I had no idea that was an issue. I'm
Yeah.
so-and-so, or I'm married to so-and-so, or I know so-and-so. So I think that this is something that is really important to us. I think it should be important to our users, our members.
Do we
So
have, do we have any history or precedent for explaining issues like that? As whether in outreach or in educational?
Oh, I'm sure we do. I'm sure there have been
Sheena's
times in the past.
shaking her head behind you, and that's okay. Not that you know of, but you might have.
I would also point out that the Nevada Library Association is, as Sina pointed out, would be an excellent resource as well.
Okay.
But that's another organization that is sort of reinventing itself. Maybe that's the wrong word, but is sort of gathering itself up and still recovering, I think, to some extent from the pandemic. And so it's in a transitional phase, but that is certainly a role that a state library association should be playing. And I definitely think we can get there. It's just going to take time. But I also think, Trustee Nichols, that you're absolutely right. And we have a lot of, the reason we've been so focused on digital collection expansion is because of the incredible amount of use that we're seeing. And I don't think, well, I know it's not going to abate. It hasn't abated. And I think part of it is that folks who would have been reserved about trying it in the past sort of maybe didn't have a choice but to learn the process during the pandemic. And now they're like, oh, this isn't scary. I can do this.
Right.
So we have a lot more users. So I think that's an excellent point.
because we could even put it on the website,
Yeah.
as you're going and you're searching, like today I was searching for a book.
Yeah.
And I went up on the website, went digital collection. There could be a little blurb right now, did you know? And kind of explain the situation. And it also explains, like, for instance, and I'm just going to use this as an example, only because I'm on the library board and I understand all this, but I had put in a request for a book. And then I checked on it a few weeks later and I still had the request, but it said the book, the subscription has expired.
Oh.
This will be available, if it gets renewed. Well, if you're just a regular user, you don't understand that. That would be another really good place to put that explanation. Here's why it expired, right? And here's what we're trying to solve. Can you help us? Get the word out.
Right.
I think there's a lot of places that we could do that for our readers. And they
Yeah,
can
and I
help
think
us
there's a
out.
lot of opportunity. Back to what you were asking for. Thank you for that, Trustee Nichols. I think that those are great suggestions because it's real time moment that you can nab someone who's been directly affected by the issue. I haven't been involved in any sort of education of this nature here at the Carson City Library. But that was something that we did when I was in Humboldt County in Winnemucca. And we did that in a variety of ways, but I would say probably in that community, one of the most impactful ways was having a relationship with the local newspaper and with the local radio station, because they're still listening to their local radio station in
It's very
Winnemucca.
effective.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has
So-
an absolute market that's still there.
And we have had the Nevada Appeal reporter who is on our beat, as he says, or we're on his beat, reach out to me several times. He's very interested in this issue. He's very much a library advocate, and so we have that resource as well. But I'm certain that the former library director, Sina Lloyd, could speak to that more if you have more
Right.
interest in that.
I don't know how much we want to meander away from the agenda item at hand.
Okay.
But, I mean, I think, all that to say, no movement, guys.
Does that mean that we have the opportunity to wait for a year and a half before we start, actually
I mean,
contacting people to?
no, you can contact people right now. Thank you for the question. That's so important. So means the window is closing, but it's not closed yet. right? So it becomes a harder needle to thread when you're not using a committee BDR or like a NACO BDR, when you're actually asking a legislator themselves, say, hey, you only get so many, can you use one for me? Like you only get 5, can I have one of those? And they've got 1,000 other people saying the same thing to them, plus whatever else is a priority for them as an elected official trying to help their communities. So it just becomes more difficult. So
But that's for this year.
right, upcoming. So it's still an option.
Mhm.
It's just going to be a more difficult needle to thread. So, if the Nevada Library Association has folks, if we have more folks who would like to try to engage a different way, or maybe if they want to, if anyone's available to come do another presentation for us and have a conversation, I'd be happy to extend that invitation. Also realizing we're in transition.
Yeah.
So, but thank you so much. So it could be, we could get very, very lucky. Still, there's still time to get lucky. But it might be that, we just know that the more time we go without even, and the BDR is just the first step. A bunch of them die if they don't get out of committee in time. So,
Well, worst case scenario is we wait until the start of the next biennium.
right.
But we know now that we can start mobilizing now. And we're going to have, this is going to, I just predict, and I could be totally wrong, but the sense that I get from the library community and what's happening with advocacy nationwide is that this is going to pick up steam. So we won't be asking people it won't be such an esoteric topic. It will be more well-known that this is what's happening. So if that makes sense.
And it's never really wasted either to go and give a presentation to a committee or to talk to an elected official, really, especially someone who isn't running up against term limits.
Right.
Because if we're talking now, and even if you get a no, if you get someone who says, oh, that sounds good, good luck with that, you've planted a seed, and maybe the next time around they'll hear it differently. So all that to say, I think that's really the end of my update on that.
Thank you.
But, do we have any other discussion on that agenda item? Looking around. Okay. All right, well, thank you. I'm going to move on to agenda item 6. This is our library director administrative reports. I'll turn it over to Dr. Holt.
Does anyone have any questions about the budget stuff? As you can see, the grants, that's still, looks like we have Bubkus, which technically we do. But the augmentation process is beginning with the city. So that means I'll be asking for the grant money that's out there that's been paid to get pulled forward and have a budget so that we can then have a budget to spend against. So that's how the city does it. I think I've explained that. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Because we'll have some funds coming down the pike, but it's going to be a few months before you'll see them on a report.
Do you have any questions from the trustees? On that? Okay.
All right. So I apologize. I just looked at my report. It's like, I missed my first report, director's report as the official director, and I've got typos in my public document.
Your
So
record.
bummer. Sorry for that. So we're still working on staffing. We're going to have shelver positions and a shelver and library clerk interview next week. We have some folks who are really interested. We've left those positions open, and we're still getting lots of people. We're actually starting to pick some steam on interest. So that's a good thing. Because we're getting better, I shouldn't say better, but just more qualified candidates, folks who probably have a skill set that's more suited to the position. We also have a senior library assistant position still that needs to get opened. to replace Jean Marie Naylor, who became our programming and outreach coordinator. Part of the reason why I haven't requested that to be filled is because it's also a position whose duties are going to look different than they were when Jean Marie was doing them. So we've really been taking some time to see where the gaps are in our workloads that need to get filled, and where what duties need to be moved off of whom to create the work that person's going to be performing. So we're not to build the plane as we're flying in it with this position. And then the 3 unclassified positions are still open. That includes the deputy library director position. So workforce development coordinator we reopened, and we've gotten a lot more responses. Technology coordinator, we have some very good candidates. One in particular has reached out to me, so there's hope there. And then, of course, the deputy library director. However, we're probably going to have some challenges with that position for a variety of reasons, not least of which the deputy library director in Washoe County is leaving. So we're going to have another system looking for a similar position. So the onus on bearing that burden is on me, which is fine. I think we're holding our heads up and continuing to spin the plates effectively. That's because we have a really awesome team who is functioning very much as a team and supporting one another really effectively. So that's how we're able to get all of this, continue to move all of this forward. So we've, just to give you a quick update on our programming, our Pokemon Club is back. And this is a teen-led program. The same teen who is part of our Teen Library Council reached out and was really enthusiastic about wanting to continue doing it. And she has. And in fact, she and the chess club are sharing the same space. So it's a really interesting vibe and juxtaposition in that room on Saturdays. And I think actually some of the chess club folks are getting interested in Pokemon, and some of the Pokemon kids are getting interested in chess. So it's this cross-pollinating that's happening,
I love it.
which is great. And so, and that Pokemon club has seen a steady attendance of about 15 kids. It's only been, I think we've had 2 thus far since it started. So it's got a following, and I don't know if you've ever seen any kids play Pokemon, but it's fascinating.
Are they playing with the cards? Like
Oh
it's
yeah,
actually
they
in their
have
hands?
these
Okay.
maps that they lay out, and then they play their cards. I mean, it's a whole, if you were ever anyone who played Magic, it's similar. It's a little
It's the training
D&D
wheels.
too. And then we actually had a Storytime mom reach out to us and ask if we could provide space for the Minden Board Game Club to have a Carson City event. So it's the same set of folks, but they wanted to grow it. And since we're so centrally located, and almost all of the Minden folks have come every week that they've done it on Sundays, and they've added members. So they get together and they play board games for like 3 hours, which is a thing. And I think people are just really wanting to commune. And so we're seeing a lot of success with those kinds of programs. And it's a passive program for us, really. We're providing the venue, but it's really awesome to know that this was a Storytime mom who then, reached out, who then has other friends who are reaching out for other programs. So it's really, our intent is, and our purpose is really it's bearing fruit. So,
I just wanted to say, I talked to my daughter who lives in the Seattle area
yeah.
recently, and she was telling me that there are bars in Seattle that have board games, that they're board game bars.
Yeah.
It's
There was one in Reno, but it closed down.
really?
Yeah.
You
So,
don't have to drink at the library. You can just go
Right.
by yourself.
right,
Yeah.
but in terms of the popularity,
Yeah.
all you need are arcade games now. but.
The retro arcade games, and you
Yeah.
have them.
I mean, are we gonna have to play like Pinball Wizard while we're playing?
Yeah, something like that.
It's gonna be round table pizza of my
There
youth
we
all over
go.
again. Um,
If there's a market.
yeah. So no, people, I think it's great.
Mm.
It's such a great thing to see people coming
Mhm.
together and really just enjoying being, participating in something that's just good, clean fun. And and they bring their own games. I mean, we have games, but they're also bringing their own games, which is cool. We also have continued to see, I mean, I just cannot talk enough about our story time because we've seen such an increase. We have a 62% increase from our pre-COVID numbers. And our Crochet Corner, Chess Club, Book Club, Lego Club, they're all just seeing steady attendance. Our book that we read this month was Bad Blood, about the Theranos Elizabeth Holmes case. And it was so interesting to hear what people had to say about that. Because I dipped in and listened to about half an hour of it. And it's great. And it's grown. So.
I just had a friend today told me that she attended the talk by Kendra Atlework on Monday, and she said there were only 6 people there. And I said, "Well, how did you even find out about it?" I had no idea that it was even a thing, that there was something you could go to. So I don't know. I never saw it on Carson Now. I didn't see it on the library's Facebook.
Oh yeah, it's been on all of our social
I
media.
saw it on
Yeah.
Facebook.
The Kendra Atlework
Yeah.
talk. Yeah, maybe I only get the children's story hour ones. But no,
Algorithms are tricky. Yeah.
I never saw that one.
Yeah, they
I-
come yeah, it's on all of our social media. I think it was actually. It was early though. We probably should have ran it again.
Mm.
Yeah, sometimes you need to. do it a
I
couple
can
times.
say though, I know that number
good
sounds
takeaway.
dismal, but we were one of the higher attended events.
Well, she has spoken around the area previously, and I guess she was at the Patagonia event on Sunday night, but she has been, because it was one of the Nevada Reads books.
Yeah, it was in
and so
Nevada Humanities.
She has been around before.
Yeah.
But I just was surprised. I said, "Well, how did you even find out about it?"
Yep.
Yeah, but I'm probably not going to go to the website to look at the calendar very often. I might sometimes, but I'd rather have it pushed to me or,
Yeah.
available in a
What you can do though
public.
too to kind of manipulate your algorithm a little bit, at least on Facebook, is go onto the library's Facebook page, like every post, make a comment on every post.
Okay.
The algorithm will go, "Oh, you
No,
must really
that's
want all
true.
that pushed
Oh,
to you."
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, that's
So,
how
and it'll
I've
help
done
bump
it.
our
I go on
traffic.
and that's how I stay up on what everyone else is doing in the libraries. First of all, I want to help them, grow their statistics.
Sure.
But I like everything by every library, and because I follow
mean,
every library.
Like and share and comment
Yeah.
on the posts, and it helps drive that
Okay.
back to you.
So I'm glad to hear that some of y'all were seeing it. I mean,
But
it
it
was,
is kind of hit and miss, yeah.
okay. So maybe we needed to post it more often.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, and Facebook will always tell you when you post on a page, be like, "Well, for $10, you can,
Right. Yeah. Well, that's
Make it
good
a
to know, though.
sponsored
That's
post.
valuable feedback.
Yeah.
That we need to be more cognizant of the fact that it's an event that can be attended for adults.
Right. And I don't, I use the online books, so I don't walk into the library all the time. So I wouldn't necessarily have seen a poster or anything.
Right.
I mean, I've probably been to the library, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks ago. So I didn't see any posters or anything, but, I didn't notice any. That doesn't mean there weren't any there. Just means I
Right.
didn't
Well,
notice.
there has been one on our slat wall in the foyer,
Mhm.
but maybe we needed to make it bigger. Maybe it needed to be twice the size of the normal flyer. I mean, these are all excellent ideas. It's kind of I sort of think of when we get this kind of feedback, it's so valuable because once we know better, we can do better, and then we can respond to that need. It's when we don't know you know, that we can't fix it. But to reiterate what Chair Knight was saying, you can, it does, your algorithm will, it will.
Well, I'll try that.
Yeah.
I mean, I know this friend of mine, she said, you know, it would be really something that our book club might have come to had anybody known about it and, you know, spread the information through our book club text instead of, because, well, you know, I'm old, so I'll say, you know, not all older people will read Facebook, or
Yeah.
they might not. Social media is not as much a part of their lives.
Well, and I would say that our programming and outreach coordinator has definitely tapped into that
Mhm.
and has a plan to how to
Oh,
do
good.
the more traditional marketing. And so we're trying to get the folks that aren't on social media. Because sure, there's lots of people who aren't doing that. And now that we know that not many, lots of people don't have computers
Right.
or they don't have Wi-Fi access, we can't miss that opportunity to engage them.
Is the library's calendar ever published in like the Nevada Appeal?
We haven't done that since I've been at the library. But
Because I do know a lot of people who get the newspaper.
Yeah.
It's like a newspaper, really. But people do get the newspaper.
right.
And, you know, you might ask your Nevada Appeal beat reporter, you know, what that would involve. I mean,
Yeah.
you usually have probably a month ahead of your activities.
Yeah. And they might need content.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's how you can really get in, is when they need content.
Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely something that I will follow up on
Okay,
and
good.
figure out how we can, if at the very least, we can figure out, and I was just thinking about this today, so it's synchronicities happening. Because I was looking at the print version of the Nevada Appeal, which I'm an electronic reader of news. But there's this section that's like, what's going on? It's these little snippets from different organizations about what they're doing for the week or the month or whatever. So we could definitely get on that at least, you know, community happenings or something to that effect. So if we can't get our whole calendar on there, we can certainly look into having something like that, highlighting an event, or so the Atlee book discussion would have been an excellent opportunity to highlight in something like that.
Yeah, and I would think that those kind of events would, you probably don't need to post the, you know, balloon baby story hour. I mean, not on a regular basis, but because a lot of those younger families might not be reading in a paper format. They're more social media oriented.
That's true.
Whereas,
But bilingual story time would be an excellent
sure.
opportunity.
Mhm,
And that's actually growing too. So,
yeah, it's cool.
and on that note, our Platikimo's conversational Spanish program that's for folks who are learning Spanish or want to practice their Spanish, English speakers that want to practice their Spanish. If we can get that program built up, then I'd like to see us do the converse and have native Spanish speakers come and speak English, but one step at a time. And we'll see how it goes. We're going to start doing it on I don't remember what day now. I think it's the early November, the 4th, maybe. And so, you know, we've got some of these programs that y'all have heard me, you know, bang the drum about, but I do that because we're seeing such incredible increase in attendance, and also just because our team that's such an incredible reflection of their hard work. And I just really want to cheer them in a public forum. And then the Digitorium, we've got new users, and it helped increase the number of Teen Library Council members. So we've got a couple of new Teen Library Council members, and we've got faces that we've not ever seen in the Digitorium. We've opened it again, as you guys know, from 2:30 to 5:30. We don't have a dedicated adult in there. We just go and monitor and just dip in every half hour and just make sure there are no shenanigans. And there is a video camera in there as well. So, and then grants, as Ms. Lloyd commented, we did submit. I saw one of them missing from your list, so I don't know if I'll talk to you. Oh, okay. So the fiscal year 23 state collection development grant award came over. We haven't received the grant and aid or the GIA that was signed, and we're now just waiting for the funds transfer. And we'll use that money also for digital collection expansion because we have not seen a decrease. In fact, we just run the numbers again on the electronic usage or materials usage for the grant request to the Friends, and it's still the same as it's been for the last 2 years. We've got about a 2-month wait for new items and about 4 people holding that are making up that 2-month wait. So the fourth person's having to wait for, theoretically, that fourth person's having to wait for a couple of months to get that material because it's so widely read.
I just have a question about, like the Overdrive books are primarily fiction.
Yeah.
So do you set aside a certain amount of money to buy hardcover nonfiction,
Hardcover nonfiction, not electronic?
non-electronic?
Oh, yes, we do.
Okay, because I know there's not as much of a selection of electronic nonfiction.
Yeah, it's growing now because I'm an electronic nonfiction reader. So I only know this, I know this from firsthand experience, that it is growing.
Mm-hmm.
But it has been, because like as you said, it's just, there's a limited amount of availability.
Sure.
But yes, we do have a specific budget set aside from our book budget. So at the start of the fiscal year, Rachel and I sat down, the collection development librarian, and figured out our budget from that book budget, how we were going to allocate that to different types. So how much are we going to spend on large print? How much are we going to dedicate anything to large prints? But you know, there's been some times where we've sort of like at the at different months pulled from different places to build a large print collection. But we've had some requests for that. So we have a dedicated, for example, we have a dedicated allocation for large print because we've had such an incredible amount of requests for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's aged. It's pretty old. So we're going to focus on that to some extent this year. And yes, long answer to a short question, yes. We do
Okay.
have dedicated nonfiction print funds.
And I do have to
Really
say,
pretty well stocked. I cruise that area.
Yeah. I mean, we've got the stuff that is never, the history stuff that never gets old. But we are also going to be making room in there because if you're a nonfiction user, you see those shelves are busting at the seams. And it's because we haven't had an opportunity to weed. So we will be weeding. And we have weeded. In fact, as a matter of fact, we just sent out 15 books to Sustainable Shelves to be recycled. Some of them we'll get credits for, but it's always going to be minimal in comparison to the stuff that's going to get recycled. But at least we're recycling. So, and that we're starting in nonfiction because we've just got some really old stuff in there. We need to make room.
So on that note, around recycling, is that something that's available to patrons? If they've got things that need to be recycled, like old textbooks that we're not going to be able to do anything with?
Oh, well, I think that's something that we would have to discuss that would involve you guys about making a decision about whether or not that is really a service that we want to offer.
Okay.
We also have to talk with Sustainable Shelves and see. I can't imagine that we're the first library to ask that question. So I would start there, and we can certainly do that, and I can do that legwork in the research before the next meeting, and then just kind of go from there.
can I ask you to explain what that is for some of us who don't know?
Oh, the Sustainable Shelves?
Mhm.
So we predominantly purchase our materials, and we have a lease with the book vendor Baker and Taylor. Baker and Taylor, at the beginning of fiscal year 22, they offered a plan called Sustainable Shelves that allows us to send back any weeded materials or any materials that that need to be that we've withdrawn and need to be discarded to them for free. So because we are one of their customers, they allow us to use this service. They send us the boxes, they send us the mailing, they gave us an account and we print out the mailing labels, and it's to promote recycling. It's to be environmentally conscious, but also they have their own paper mills. So they're breaking those recycled books down into pulp and making their own paper and then publishing their books on that paper. So it's a way for us to recycle, because there's really no other opportunity here. There's no other place. There used to be recycling over in, I can't remember, it's like, was Northern Nevada Recycling, where you could take books for recycling. They stopped taking books 2 or 3 years ago. And so there's nowhere here in Northern Nevada to recycle books. So what,
Dumb question, why are we recycling them? Why are we not maybe offering them for sale first, like having a book sale? And then the ones that don't sell, recycling?
typically the ones that we're getting rid of, for like textbooks, for example, we're getting rid of them because they're so aged out, and the friends won't take them either because they're so aged out. Most of the time, the books that we are, well, let me back up. We do offer them up for sale first to either Baker and Taylor, who will then resell them and give us a credit for new material, if the material is something they know they can sell. A lot of times it's damaged or it's old and there's no audience for it. And then we have a place to recycle it. So it's a place for us to send damaged materials. But our process is, we first try to see if Sustainable Shelves or Baker and Taylor can sell it. And then we will next try what another organization we use called Better World Books, who will also purchase materials. And usually they'll sell them to or third world countries that don't have a lot of access to books or would not necessarily, that need books. And so they will let us know what they accept. And so we have a system that we use with them, and we'll type in the ISBN number and say, will you take this book? And they'll say yes. And then they'll go out and donate it. And sometimes they sell it.
Yeah,
And they will.
They have a store on Amazon, because
Yeah,
I know.
they'll
bought a
sell
few
it.
books
Right,
from
yeah,
them.
we talked about this last time. They'll sell it and we'll get a credit for it.
Okay.
Yeah. So we do try to sell the materials, but it's really an excellent way for us to not have to face the questions that will inevitably come if people see that we're discarding, if we're throwing books out in the garbage.
Right.
We don't have to do that. And a bookstore in Reno just dealt with that. I don't know if anyone saw that in the news, but there was a bookstore, a textbook bookstore in Reno who was, they're a chain and they were closing. And so they're closing that location. But they had a bunch of old textbooks that were outdated, and that there was be no opportunity to sell them. Now, this is a private company that was getting rid of its own inventory, but they were throwing these textbooks away in their dumpster, and citizens were driving by and seeing them and called Fox News, Channel 11, who then reached out to the business, but then also to the Washoe County Library to find out what they do with old textbooks. So we are in a position where we can say, wow, I'm so glad that you asked. This is what we do. We sent them off to be recycled. So it's a really excellent program. Oh,
Yeah, I feel
so let me
like
get back
we've
to,
totally veered off of your.
yeah, I'm sorry. Does that answer your question? Okay. And then we're done with spending the $15K that we got through ARPA funds through the state as a pass-through, and we purchased 244 items with that $15,000. And then we've, as Ms. Lloyd mentioned, we've submitted our requests for Friends funding, and it's to continue to expand the digital collections. I came up with these numbers based on, for the digital collections expansion, to meet or just come under the amount that we've gotten in grant funds for the same expansion over the last couple of years. The Baker and Taylor lease items, the Friends have historically paid for most of that lease or all of it in the past. The Capital City Reads program, which is the program that we run in April during National Library. It's aligned with National Library Week. This year, it's also aligned with the Mark Twain's Days, the first annual Mark Twain's Days event. And so we're going to be reading Roughing It by Mark Twain.
Nice.
Because a lot of it takes place here in Northern Nevada. So then, of course, the summer reading program, we did ask for that amount based on what we spent this year and what we expect to spend going forward, particularly because this year we were able to we were able to do what we were able to do because we used resources and materials that we already had on hand, but we exhausted a lot of that this year. So we've asked the Friends for $5,000. In the past, they've given us between $4,000 and $5,000. And then, in fact, with the community outreach, I actually, at the last minute, at the 11th hour, eliminated that and added it to the digital collections expansion. I just felt like it was a better use of the funds, and community outreach, we can cobble that together from other funds. So, and then we also did have our staff development day on the 3rd of October, and it was awesome. The team all came prepared, ready to talk, had input, things to say, and so we were able to talk about our accomplishments of the goals over the last year, of which we met a lot, and the team really knew what ones that they thought we had met, and it was a really awesome and very robust conversation. And then we moved and reorganized some of our goals. This thing is sensitive. It doesn't like to be kicked. So we moved some of our priorities. We have like 5 priorities. I'm making this up, 4 or 5, and we reprioritized them in terms of ranking based on where we thought we needed to, where we had gaps, where we had one organizational goal. We made that our top priority last year. Okay, we've made a substantial amount of improvement here, so let's move this other one to the top so we can make that same amount of improvement, or gain more momentum in that area. And that this was absolutely decided by consensus, and we'll see an updated version of that. Dr. Steinman, the consultant, is still working on it. And then, that's basically the takeaway from that. We don't have the final product from him yet, but it's forthcoming.
Right.
So as soon as we have it, I'll send it out to everyone, and I'll also have it loaded onto our website. That's it. That's all I've got. Any questions for me?
Thank you, Doreen.
Besides?
Additional questions, I should say, because we do kind of interrupt you as you go.
Awesome. No, it's good.
When you are putting together the materials for next month, you can change the footer on the bottom of page 2 and update it to yourself instead of Dr. Colgrove.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to also try and not come in so hot on these agendas. I say that to both DA Woodbury, who is always ready to pinch hit for me at the last minute, because I'm always coming in hot on these, and to give you guys a little bit more opportunity to ponder.
Well, that actually does lead me right into agenda item 7, board members' announcements, requests for information. So that would be any items that you want to see on the next agenda.
Ooh, can I say something really quickly about that, though?
Yes.
I just want everyone to remember that it's a unique meeting. I think it's the 2nd of December because of our combined meeting for the holidays. So,
Yeah, if we try to do the 4th Thursday, it'll be,
Hmm?
thanks. If we try to do the 4th Thursday of November, I think we'll all be busy.
yeah, exactly. So it's on the calendar. I think it's the 2nd.
December 2nd.
So let me look.
December.
Hold on a sec. I think we did decide, but I can look real quick.
Thank you.
No, it's always a
We do
combined
like
meeting.
a combined, so November and December meetings, instead of doing it at 2 meetings, we do one.
It's
in
the
between,
1st.
December 1st. Same time, 5:30?
Mm-hmm.
In the calendar now. Make sure it's in the calendar, I should say. December 1st at 5:30.
Well, maybe I'll come in, maybe I'll come in hot on this one last year, 2022 agenda, so it'll remind you guys that it's, when you're getting it the first week in December, you'll know that, that the meeting's not until that week.
All right, library board meeting. Our next one will be December 1st, 5:30. Okay. Good announcement. Next meeting, December 1st at 5:30. Any other requests for information, agenda items we want to see? This isn't the only time. If there's some other, while we're developing the agenda, if there's some other item you want to see placed there, certainly reach out.
Yeah, and even if you're
All right.
coming in the day of the meeting, we can add it as late materials. I mean, if you think of something, don't be afraid to, if we've already posted, we can add it.
Great. All right, I'll move on. Last public comment period. Any members of the public who wish to address the Library Board of Trustees may come forward at this time, discuss any topic under authority here. Miss Lloyd, please. Welcome
Sina
back.
Lloyd, member of the Carson City community, for the record. I just wanted to say on your action item today, the e-resources purchasing, etc. In the past, so Douglas County Library in Colorado, they actually formed their own, essentially like Overdrive, and did indie books and worked with authors to do that. I don't know where it sits now. That was probably 8 to 10 years ago. And that individual actually works for ALA now and addresses some of that issue on the national level. That being said, I think that the Nevada Library Association historically has lobbied for on behalf of libraries in the past. 1 year, was that 2017 also? Yeah. We were successful and we were able to get funding kind of at the last minute.
That was the large one shot.
There are tricks. There are ways to do that. I am happy to talk to you guys about what I think could potentially be done. Right now, in my position, in my day job, I am doing public policy for my organization on the federal level. I think that probably I don't know what your BDR looks like currently, but I think probably the most success that you could have is probably on that federal level, trying to regulate potentially the cost of these items for libraries. But I also just want to bring up to the board today, there is a bill that I do have knowledge of will be reintroduced here in this session of the Nevada legislature, and it is Dina Neal's tax bill. Don't remember what number it was from last year, but in my reading of it, along with some of the representatives at the time from the Nevada Library Association, there was the potential that libraries would have to start paying taxes on digital resources based on how that legislation was written. And that would greatly decrease the ability for libraries to purchase for any e-learning resources. That could be databases along with digital books. So just bringing that to your attention, that may also be sitting out there again this coming session, because there is the intent for that to be reintroduced. I do not think it's the intent of the author to do that, but the way it was written, there was concern that it could do that.
If I may, is that the same one that was on the same tax one that was on in last legislature? Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. More public comment or? Thank you, Ms. Lloyd. Additional public comment? Any member of the public?
Yeah, I just
Or-
wanted to remind everybody, I know Saturday is Nevada Day, but the Stewart Indian School Cultural Center and Museum is having a really big to-do starting from 1, because they know that the parade's going on, so you can go from the parade down there. they have invited a lot of their older alumni to come out with some of their artifacts. And there's going to be prizes for like whoever brings the oldest, yearbook or letter jacket or whatever they have. Yeah, and so they're going to have some games, I guess, going on. Also, there'll be an author there, I believe, Samantha Williams, who was there not that long ago, who gave a talk. She just wrote, she did her thesis on the Stewart Indian School boarding school experience, and she's written a book on it, and she should be out there. So, anyways, it's from 1 to 5. It'll be a lot of fun.
Put it in my phone. Any other public comments? Members of the public? Anybody on the phone?
There are no callers on the line.
Thank you. All right, I love the voice in the sky. I love it. Okay. All right, everybody. I'm gonna say right. All right, guys. I'm gonna say we are adjourned. We will see you December 1st at 5:30. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.